Welcome to Summertime is Reading Time in the Diamond. My name is Melissa. I'm a chemical oceanographer. I'm also a volunteer with the Fleet Science Center. I'm excited to be reading to you today. We are reading to you with permission from the publisher Chronicle Books. The title of our book is Manfish, a story of Jacques Cousteau. It was written by Jennifer Byrne and illustrated by Eric Pybre. First up, there's a little poem. Bubbles rising through the silence of the sea. Silvery beads of breath from a man deep, deep down in a strange and shimmering ocean land of swaying plants and fantastic creatures. A manfish swimming, diving into the unknown, exploring underwater worlds no one had ever seen and no one could ever have imagined. And there's someone down there scuba diving. Our story starts many years before, in France, with a little baby boy born under the summer sun. His parents named him Jacques. From the very beginning, little Jacques loved water, the way it felt on his hands, his face, his body. And water made him wonder. He wondered why ships floated, why he floated, and why rocks sank. And here he is doing some experiments in a really beautiful little town. I also felt this way about the ocean when I was little. Couldn't stop looking at it. One day, Jacques read a story about a man who hid underwater by breathing through a long tube. Jacques tried it and discovered it was impossible. He dreamed that someday he would be able to breathe underwater for real. At night, Jacques dreamed he could fly, with the birds, among the clouds, with his arms stretched out like wings. I like this photo because here's Jacques dreaming of flying, and there's fish and birds all together, and coral, and also trees. Seems like a great dream. Jacques spent his days playing, experimenting, and creating. He wrote little books that he illustrated with his own drawings, and he was fascinated by machines. He studied blueprints and built a model of a crane that was as tall as he was and actually worked. Here's his little workshop. Got tools and books about the Mediterranean, and this one's about diving suits. Movies fascinated Jacques too. He wanted to know how they were made, how the cameras worked, and how the chemicals made pictures appear on the film. Jacques saved his allowance penny by penny until he had enough to buy a small home movie camera. The first thing he did was take it apart and put it back together. It's a good thing it worked after that. Then he began to film everything around him. He put his brother, cousins, parents, and friends in his movies. He dressed up as a villain with a painted-on mustache and made some very villainous films. Jacques was always the star, the director, the writer, and usually the cameraman. I like this. Looks like he's got all sorts of different types of movies. And on this page, he's taking a movie too, because you can see the round edges. So this is a picture through his camera lens. When Jacques finished school, he joined the French Navy. His ship sailed all around the world, and everywhere he went, he filmed what he saw. In China, he filmed men catching fish with their bare hands. They held their breath underwater for many minutes. Jacques wondered what that would be like. One day at a beach, a friend gave Jacques a pair of goggles with rubber frames and glass to look through. Jacques wore them into the ocean. Beneath the water, he was surrounded by silvery green forests of sea plants and fish he had never seen before. Everything was silent and shimmering. It was a whole new world. When he came up, he saw cars, peoples, buildings, and telephone poles. Once again, he went below into the magical underwater world. At that moment, Jacques knew his life was changed forever. His eyes had been opened to the wonders of the sea. I like this picture. It reminds me of when I go snorkeling, and there's this line, and you can see the fish below, and yeah, the world that we usually live in up on top there. Got all sorts of creatures down here. There's a ray and a sea snake, and these are little flatfish that blend in with the sand. I don't know if, hopefully you can see them. That's what they do, they camouflage. Some more fish. And some clownfish here by the anemone. Oh, and an octopus. All sorts of cool stuff. Some great corals over here too. It's beautiful down below the surface. Jacques and his friends, Philippe and Didi, began to dive together. They experimented to see how long they could stay underwater and how deep they could go. Jacques created a waterproof case for his camera to film the amazing kingdom he and his friends were exploring beneath the surface. See them going a little bit lower here. They made rubber suits to keep themselves warm and flippers to help them kick better. But Jacques wanted to stay down longer than just one breath at a time. He realized he needed to take more air with him, enough air to explore the mysterious depths and vast expanses of the ocean, to swim through the sea as free as a fish. He wanted to become a man-fish, and he began to work on just how to do it. I'm so glad that Jacques Cousteau and other people figured this out so that I can go scuba diving without having to do all that work. Here's a picture of him scuba diving once he's figured everything out. On a warm summer day, Jacques stepped into the blue Mediterranean Sea with his new invention. He called it the aqua lung because aqua means water, and our lungs are the part of the body that holds the air we breathe. Below the surface, Jacques swam and glided and dove. He did flips and somersaults. He stood upside down on one finger and laughed bubbles into the sea. That's my favorite part of scuba diving too, that you can do all these acrobatic things that I can't do on land. Jacques could breathe beneath the water. Now he could swim across miles of ocean, his body feeling what only scales had felt, his eyes seeing what only fish had seen. The water made him feel like he was flying, just like in his dreams. Jacques had done it. He had become a man-fish. I like this. The other fish probably very curious about what this man-fish is. You can see here he's wearing a weight belt. That's because our bodies usually float, and so you need weights to pull you down. Oh, I like this picture. This reminds me of the research vessels that I work on when I go out to sea. Jacques was ready to explore the oceans of the world. He needed a boat and found a big old wooden Navy ship named Calypso. In a year, he turned it from a warship into an explorer's ship. Jacques, Philippe, and Didi gathered a crew, their aqualungs, their hopes, and their dreams, and set off to explore the inside of the sea, to film a world that no one had ever seen before. And here on this ship, you got everything that they might need. It looks like they're setting up some experimenting equipment back here. And there's a deck down here that they probably put a ladder on so that they could dive into the ocean. You got people with their blueprints and plans here, changing around things to make it an exploring ship. And then it looks like someone here bringing food, because you have to bring everything with you. There's no stopping at the grocery store when you're out to sea. Oh, this one changes to vertical. Look at that, that's beautiful. Ooh, all the way down to the ocean depths. All right. On their journeys, they dove deep into a seascape of plants, green and purple prickly plants, red branchy plants, spongy plants, wispy, feathery, swaying plants, slow dancing to the rhythms of the sea. They discovered plants that could feed you, plants that could poison you, plants that looked like fish, and fish that looked like plants. Their cameras captured camouflaged scorpionfish, ugly as toads with poisonous spines, dorados, brilliant shining fish that glowed the color of emeralds, sapphires, and rubies, checkerboard fish with red and white checks from head to tail. Well, there's so many things here. There's dolphins and jellyfish, manta rays, and then all these fish here, and we've got our scuba divers. Ooh, and some sharks here, and an orca and some sea turtles. All right. Deep down, they discovered a kingdom of giant rays, fish that fly through the water with wings that swim. They came face to face with a fish as big as a truck, with long fangs, lips like giant tires, and huge saucer eyes. They called it the truckfish. On the bottom, they found pink ghost crabs with eyes on long stalks, buried so deep in the sand, they looked like a garden of eyes. And flutefish, that's this one right here, with heads like horses and bodies the shape of tubes, sticking out of rocky openings like pencils in a cup. Well, there's all sorts of things in here too. This is a lionfish, and this is an eel. Here's that ghost crab they mentioned. I think they call it a ghost crab because it's all white. And a bunch more cool fish. I think this is a parrotfish. All right, oh, one more page. They swam with giant whales, hitched rides on sea turtles, and made friends with porpoises with shining eyes and smiling faces. They filmed fierce and frightening sharks, so strange and dangerous, Jacques and his crew had to build cages, not for the sharks, but for themselves, so they could make their movies without being eaten. Here are those sperm whales, and then some sharks. They don't look too scary. This one's a whale shark. It only eats plankton and other small things that it filters through the water, so that's definitely not dangerous. Everywhere the Calypso went, Jacques and his crew made films of what they saw. Films that played in movie theaters. Films that played on TV. Here you can see they're in a movie theater. All these heads down here watching, someone pointing out something. Millions of people all over the world discovered the wonders of the sea for the very first time with Jacques, Philippe, Didi, and their adventurous crew. Oh, this picture is not nearly as pretty as those last ones, is it? Let's read what it's about. After Jacques spent most of his life making movies about the sea, he saw something happening, something shocking. Plants that used to be alive and healthy were being poisoned. Fish were sick and dying. Jacques saw that people, without realizing it, were slowly killing the sea and its creatures by dumping garbage and poisonous chemicals into the ocean he loved so much. Jacques knew what he had to do. He had to make movies, movies to warn people, movies to save the sea. And yeah, you can see all sorts of pollution here. There's a drum that's leaking oil into the water. And that gets all over everything on the seafloor and into the meals of the fish and the other animals. There's a tire here, some poison, more trash. And you can see in this picture, there's a whole lot less animals, right? There's only over here maybe a couple of clams and a couple crabs. But yeah, when things get really polluted like that and the plants die, then the whole ecosystem dies. All the fish don't come around anymore because there's no food. And that goes all the way up into the bigger fish and the sharks and the whales and everything. Jacques also spoke to presidents, to kings and queens, to people all over the earth, asking them to help save our oceans, our planet. And he spoke to children, like you. Jacques dreamed that someday it would be you, exploring worlds never seen, never imagined. Whole new worlds, silent and shimmering, worlds that are now yours, to discover, to care for, and to love. And here's our last picture with Jacques. He was famous for wearing that red hat. And a bunch of kids coming out to explore. There's some in the water here. Another one's looking at these dolphins. I love dolphins. No matter how many times I see dolphins when I go out to sea, they always look so friendly and so happy, and I love seeing them. The end. There's a cool picture on the last page here that looks like film strips from one of his movies. Thank you for joining us. Please go to Deep's Facebook page at facebook.com, Deep San Diego, to let us know if you liked the book. Also, please don't forget to record all of the read aloud books you listen to in your summer reading log so you can win prizes from the library.